One last part of human geography I want to discuss is economic geography. And when it comes to the Middle American realm, probably the most important component of economic geography are its ties with North America. And these ties have really been enhanced through Mexico's participation, note only Mexico, in NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is an agreement between three countries: the United States, Canada, and Mexico. In fact, the agreement is actually being renegotiated now and rebranded as under a different name called the USMCA, which is United States, Mexico, and Canada. The NAFTA does not include Caribbean countries. There are other free trade agreements, such as CAFTA-DR, which is an agreement between the United States, Central American republics, as well as the Dominican Republic. And there are also some other free trade agreements between countries in the Caribbean, such as called CARICOM, which is the Caribbean Community, a free trade agreement that extends from Mexico down through the Caribbean and into part of South America. I'm going to jump ahead, and one thing I do want to highlight as far as the economic geography, particularly of Mexico, is this what are called maquiladoras. That trade between Mexico and the United States has fueled the rise of these four-known assembly factories in Mexico called maquiladoras. And maquiladoras, what they do is assemble imported duty-free raw materials. So in other words, they can freely bring raw materials into Mexico. And in Mexico, the workers assemble those products into more refined goods, and then the refined goods are trucked back over into North America. And they're known for being close to the US border. At one point before NAFTA, they had to be right along the US border, but that's no longer the case. And you do have more maquiladoras extending down into central Mexico now, as they try to find more people who will work for lower wages depending on what it is they're producing. And I'm going to try to include some type of video on with a little bit more information on maquiladoras. This is a map again showing the distribution. The size of the circle is the number of maquiladoras. You can see there's large concentrations along the border. But there are other maquiladoras extending down through central Mexico and even all the way to the Yucatan Peninsula. A couple other figures I want to highlight from the chapter. This one is showing physiography and natural resources in Mexico. This is and one thing I want to highlight here are where oil resources are. That Mexico is a major oil producer, but there's a geographic pattern to where oil is produced, and it is produced in the Gulf of Mexico here, where you see these red blotches. This is an extension of oil that is also produced in parts of Texas and parts of the southern United States that extends down through Mexico as well. And for example, on the Pacific coast, you don't see the same pattern. It's limited to the eastern Gulf of Mexico. The other thing I want to highlight, I apologize, this figure is a bit blurry, but this is a figure in the book that's showing economic and political disparities. And I want to highlight, and so here you see the amount of maquiladora employment, and you can see it's much higher along these border zones, but it's not exclusively in those border zones. You also have maquiladoras extending into other parts of Mexico as well. However, as you get further into the south, you don't have that as much industry. And if you look at the incomes of people in Mexico, the lowest incomes are in the south. And you can see these colors, the second lowest here in this kind of shade of blue, and this little bit of darker shade of blue here in Chiapas is the lowest category. So there is a concentration of poverty, particularly in the very southern part of Mexico. Lastly, the thing I want to talk about is the Panama Canal. And I'll include a video that has a little more visuals on the Panama Canal. A couple of things that I'll highlight is that it was first built around 100 years ago, or 1914. And it was here, this is where the Panama Canal is, I'm getting ahead of myself. And it was developed by the United States in what was called the canal zone that it controlled. And eventually, the United States gave up the canal zone and the canal back to Panama, and from the 1970s to the 1990s. And one thing that's happened recently is the Panama Canal has been expanded so that it can hold larger ships. And a second thing that's happening is there has been some talk of developing a second canal like the Panama Canal, but instead in Nicaragua here, where you see this red line. More on that later. So here's a closer view of this proposed Nicaraguan canal. This is showing where the Panama Canal is, and here's a closer view of that. And we'll include a video that has a little bit more flavor so it's easier to see what's going on. And the reason why their expansion is needed is that there's a limit to how large of a boat can go through the Panama Canal. And one reason boats have gotten larger is because of the rise of what's called containerized shipping. So if you see all these boxes on here, those boxes might look like things that you'll see on a truck or perhaps on a train rolling through town. We'll talk a little bit about those more in a moment, but over time, this is the size of a container ship that can go through the Panama Canal before its expansion. And then after the expansion, you can go to these much larger boats. They're called the post-Panamax ship, which is a type of boat that can carry a lot more shipping containers at one time. And this is really helpful because of the increase of trade between the United States and China. That has really fueled the rise of these large ships with a lot of containers on them. So being able to get through the Panama Canal with a lot of containers is helpful for world trade. And so again, the topic that I want to relate to this is called containerized shipping. And this has happened sometime since the 1960s, where we have moved from hand loading goods onto ships and trains to putting them in these large boxes, which are multimodal, meaning that the boxes themselves are loaded onto trucks, onto ships, or onto trains. And since machines can just move these boxes from one place to the other, this really has made a big impact on the cost of shipping things to different places.